You bet. I'm Alicia Moulton, and I am part of the honey company. My husband Stan and I, that's our business and our livelihood is we do all the things bees, from beekeeping, and we sell colonies in the spring, and we sell honey, and we sell all the things bees. I don't know how to say. We have a really robust website, thehoneycompany.com, and it's a great resource for if you want to learn more about bees or honey, all the things. And we have, we have 6 online courses now that you can group together. And anyway, and they go through and teach you all of the different things about honeybees and how to keep them, and go through the whole gamut from beginner to advanced queen rearing. And then, let's see, my husband's he's a 4th generation beekeeper, and his family has been keeping bees since I think 1890. So our kids, we count them as 5th generation beekeepers. And then we got married about just less than 20 years ago. I don't remember the math now. We're at that point. But so that's when I joined the bees. But I've always had a passion for agriculture. I used to work for Utah State University Extension before I had babies, and really love doing classes like this and talking to people about all the ag things. So anyway, today I thought we would go through what we call the 4 essential questions for hive inspections. So that's our fancy thing. When we're inspecting honeybee colonies, each time we look for 4 things, and each thing is kind of a complex topic, but I thought we'd go through those and I don't know, kind of talk about them. But I have a plan, but if you guys want to talk about something else, or if you have questions that you'd like to ask instead of that, I'm happy to divert and go there instead if you want me to. So
go for it.
Okay. So if you have a question, just stop me and ask it, and I'll do my best to answer. Is it best for the video if I repeat the question?
Probably.
Okay. So our 4 essential questions are, you can find those on the first page. They are, do my bees have enough room, or the correct amount of room in their colony? The second question is, how is my queen? The third question is, are my bees healthy? And the 4th one is there honey in the colony? So I thought, if it's okay, we could just kind of go through those and learn about those in depth. There's like a lot of terminology in beekeeping, so if you're like, what is she talking about? You probably are not the only one, and I don't realize that I'm saying all their bee words because they're just like every day for me. So if you need to ask what something means, please do. Okay, so honeybees are really, really hard workers, and they like to build comb and fill that comb with babies and with honey any chance they get. And as long as they have the supplies, the nectar, and the landscape to do that, they will build and grow and do really quickly, right? And anyway, their work ethic is kind of a cool thing. Our state, Utah, is like, we modeled our state after that, or our emblem and stuff, because of the work ethic of the honeybees. So when we start bees in the spring, we usually start with a small miniature colony. So sometimes people start with what's called a package, which is like a cage of bees, and it's just like screened in, and then there's a little queen and some sugar syrup. Come on in. And they'll shake those into the hive, and then the bees, that's just bees, and they establish their colony. They'll draw out comb, the queen will begin laying eggs and create a brood nest, and then the workforce bees will go out and forage and bring resources back into the hive. And the colony is made up of tens of thousands of worker bees, and then there's which are female. There's hundreds of drone bees, which are male, and their job is to mate with a queen. And then there's usually 1 queen bee in a colony. There's some exceptions, like sometimes mothers and daughters will lay eggs side by sides, or sometimes they'll be so isolated they don't know there's another queen. Anyway, but that's rare. Mostly there's just 1 queen. Yeah.
Do you need to wait till it's not freezing to start your colony?
Usually we wait till springtime, because we need the bees to grow, other colonies of bees to grow enough that they have a surplus of worker bees to donate to create the new colonies. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes those new colonies come from warmer places, like Utah's really cold farther into the year. So we buy them from like California or other places of the country. They buy them like North Carolina or Florida or something. But here, primarily, it's California is our source. And so just because their growing season is a little bit ahead of ours, and the bee industry kind of goes to California for almond pollinations in the early spring. So once it's warm enough, those bees will start to multiply and replicate, and then they donate some workers, and they can artificially like raise a bunch of queens in the same colony and create a new colony like that. So that would be a package colony. And a nucleus colony, which we kind of specialize in selling nucleus colonies, but those are 5 frames of bees, and they come on frames with comb and honey and baby brood, and the queen is laying. And that's just, it has all the resources of a full hive just in miniature, right? So we can take those 5 frames and we can place them in a big 10 frame box, which is the standard size. There are other sizes too, but standard is 10 frames, and we can put those 5 frames into a box, and then those bees will grow out and fill in the frames to the side of it. And then once those frames are filled up in the bottom box, then we add additional boxes on top of that bees can kind of crawl through freely. And we add those boxes one at a time. As the bees fill up those boxes and need more room, we give them more room. We have to monitor that closely, because if we forget or if we don't get there in time and don't add another box and they feel crowded, sometimes they will swarm, and they can swarm anyway. Doesn't have to be because of that. But if they feel really crowded, they could leave the hive, or half of the bees could leave the hive, and it kind of stunts that colony's growth for the year, and it makes their chances of surviving lower. So through the summer, we grow the colony. We keep adding boxes on the top, or there's other ways to give the bees more room until the peak of summer, which the end of summer, usually around here, well, is like, in the fall. I'm trying to think. Labor Day is a good marker where we say that's when we harvest honey, and then after that we kind of leave it for the bees. So that's kind of the peak. And then for winter, we take the hive back down. We decrease the hive colony size so that the bees have less to heat in the wintertime. Does that make sense? So basically the colony starts out small and it grows through the summer, and then it decreases in numbers through the winter. So through the fall until we go into winter, and then it comes around and does it all over again year after year, hopefully. Yeah.
So when you mean decrease the hive, is to kill the bee?
No, we take the boxes off, we shake the bees into the lower boxes, and they could be a little bit crowded, but we take off the top 2 boxes, leave the bees there, but usually the top boxes are filled with honey, so we'll extract that honey, leaving the bees enough to survive. They make a surplus. We leave them enough to get through the winter, and then we take the surplus back and we'll extract that. And then
But still the same amount of bees.
Yep. So we just compress them down into smaller colonies. They naturally sort of start to die off in the fall and winter because they only live a certain amount of time.
Oh.
And so sometimes there's a generation of worker bees that are prepared to go through the winter, so they get all nice and fat and they survive longer than typical foraging bees do. So that decrease is kind of a natural thing. And so we help them out by making the colonies smaller so that they can stay warmer in the winter. Yeah, Jane.
So you mentioned forager bees, worker bees. Tell us other names and
Okay,
functions.
so when I'm talking about different kinds of bees, except for drones and queens, which we talked about before, the queen bee is the one that lays the eggs, the drones are the males. All the other bees in the hive are female worker bees, but we call them different names depending on the task that they have adopted. So sometimes that comes with age, like when they're first emerge as an adult bee, then they work in the nursery. They like clean up their cell and they clean up other cells, and they're like house bees and nurse bees. They feed other larvae, and then as they mature, their body develops differently. Like when they're very young, they have glands that help them produce feed for the baby bees, and then as they get older, those glands atrophy. They can come back if they're needed in the hive. And then eventually they work their way towards being a foraging bee, and that means that they're flying out and gathering something and bringing it back. So they gather, of course, nectar, which is what they make into honey. They also gather pollen, and they gather propolis, and they gather water, and they gather, that's it. Okay, those are the things, I think. Does anyone know another one that I missed? Okay, but they gather those things, and so one bee is probably going to be assigned to do one task. So like they might be a water gatherer, and then they'd go and they'd find water and bring it back. Or they might be a nectar gatherer, and they'll fly out and they'll come back and dance and show other nectar gatherers where to go.
How do they carry it?
What was that?
How do they carry water and nectar?
They ingest it, and they have a special sac in their body that we call it the honey sac, but it's a specialized stomach. And it's kind of like a crop in a bird, but the honey sac is like a lot, like a digestive system like flows along. It's before the stomach that digests their food, so they can store it there. And then when they get back to the hive, they can regurgitate the water or the nectar to.
Is that the bigger bees you see, like they look for the fat?
Oh,
You can see the yellow.
it could be, or those might be bumblebees too.
Bumblebees, yeah.
Yeah, those are cute. They would also do that. They would also have like a nectar sac or a honey sac that they could store nectar or
But
water
they're
in.
not associated with the honeybee.
Yeah, they're different species than the honeybee, but they're both bees, and we love bumblebees too.
What is nectar?
Okay, nectar is so in a flower, the nectar secretes like a sweet substance, like it's sugar and water and some other things in like unique properties of the plant. Every plant has a different chemical makeup of its nectar, but it's basically sugar and water and like herbal, whatever's unique to that plant. And the bees will visit it and drink it from the flower. And the flower's like reason for producing nectar is that it wants the bee to pick up the pollen from the flower, and then as the bee's drinking the nectar, its body is fuzzy from head to toe. Even its eyeballs are fuzzy, right? And it will get pollen from one plant all over it, and that's the plant's way of sending its DNA from one plant to another. So if it's on one plant and then it visits another plant of the same species, it can fertilize that plant to make a seed, yeah? So it transfers the DNA for the plant, and the incentive is the nectar. And of course, a lot of different species do that pollinating as well, but honeybees is one that we can like see and handle and like keep track of a little bit easier, so they're sort of a benchmark species for that. Okay.
How far away do the bees fly to find the food?
Okay, so how far away do bees fly to find the food? They can go pretty far. So in the desert, they can fly up to 3 miles.
Wow.
But that number, take numbers with like a grain of salt. Like if they don't have to go 3 miles, they definitely won't. But they can go that far. So something like maybe a misperception that I hear often is that they're like, oh, the bees will be fine because I have a really big garden.
Oh my gosh.
The garden, that's great. And have a really big garden with lots of flowers. That's important. But the bees will forage much farther than one individual garden, right? So it matters, like when we're talking about providing enough nectar sources, we're talking about in the landscape as a whole and not just in your individual yard. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So like places with a lot of like fruit trees or even ornamental flowering trees that bees favor, like linden trees, those areas with lots of that just do better. Honeybees do better in communities with that. So, does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to. Let's see. We kind of talked about that. All right. So for our area, and this maybe I'm kind of going over this for people who do keep bees or have kept bees in other areas and then are coming back here and try to keep bees in Sanpete. This is sort of our timeline for winter preparation for this area. So as we're going, say the bees have been foraging all summer and it was a really healthy summer and it's time to get them ready for winter, like what does that look like? I know it's May, but we start now. We start in January, February to plan for the next winter, right? As soon as we come out, we're like, do they have enough for winter, right? So, these are generalizations. These are not like exact written in stone. Nothing's like set. If you are off by a few weeks, it's okay. And Spring City is sometimes a little bit later than these dates because we are just a little bit higher in elevation. But these are generalization dates. So what we do is we have some tasks that we kind of pick holidays because they're easy to remember, but it doesn't have to be that day, right? So around Labor Day, that's when we try to extract all the honey and be like finished extracting around that time so that any nectar that the bees will gather after that will be for the bees to go into winter, okay? So, and also like the stuff that's blooming after Labor Day is like rabbit brush and rabbit brush honey. Stan likes it, but I think it's disgusting. It's not good, it's really bitter. So it's good for them to keep that honey. I don't want it, just kidding. It's, okay, so
But
around
at
then
that
is when
point-
we extract. Yeah.
Sorry, at that point, do you start feeding the bees?
Well, we extract and then we don't start feeding yet because there's still blooming plants out there. So if we extract by around Labor Day, then they're gonna keep foraging and then hopefully by our next marker, they'll make weight for the winter. So around early October, we're gonna reduce the hive. So we'll take all the bees out of the top boxes if there are any more, and we'll make sure that they're down in 1 or 2 boxes so they have less space to heat. Yeah.
How do you extract the honey?
Okay, we extract the honey. We have, well, what my husband does this, not me, but what he does is he'll open the hive and he'll harvest the honey. So he'll take out frames. If it's a frame of honey, he'll shake off the bees, put it in a bee-type place, and keep going till he gets all the frames that he wants to get the honey out of. Then we take it into the extracting house and we cut off the cappings using a capping scratcher. So when honey is cured, bees put a layer of beeswax on top of those cells, of the honeycomb cells, and that's how we know it's ready to harvest, right? If it's not capped over, then it's still too wet and it could ferment. But once it's capped over, it's dry enough that it can keep pretty much forever.
And the bees do that themselves.
Yep, the bees do that themselves. So because there's cappings on the top though, we have to remove those because they're like sealing the honey in. So it's kind of like a wide fork, like with tons of prongs, a capping scratcher, and we scratch off just the very top layer of cappings, and then on both sides, and then we'll put it into a centrifuge extractor, a spinner. And we save the cappings wax, and then if you've ever seen, like we do booths and stuff, sometimes some places, if you ever see our beeswax candles, those are made out of the cappings wax that we scratch off of the top. Anyways, we spin out the honey from the frame. We have an extractor that holds, there's lots of different sizes. One of ours holds 20. And then we spin out the honey in all 20 frames, and then basically all we do to bottle our honey is we let that honey flow through a screen, like just a kitchen screen, basically to take out any large wax particles, or the official name, bee's knees. We take them out, we filter those out, and then we put it into a bottle. So our honey is really raw, we don't heat it. The sun heats the honey, like in the summer, the beehive gets whatever temperature it is outside, right? So it can get up to 100 degrees, but we don't heat it more than that. Sometimes the trick is that you can heat up the room, but not the honey, because we like raw. We're weird. Like I told you, we're weird, crunchy folks. So we like to do raw honey that has not been heated at all. We don't even use, like some people use a hot knife to extract. That's fine, they can. We just are like purists, I guess. We like it to be all the way raw. Anyway, there's a lot of nutritional benefits to having raw honey. Sometime we can talk about honey. Okay, so around in October, we're gonna reduce the hive, and then in late October, that's around our first frost date. Well, ours is actually a little earlier than that, like 6, anyway, in Spring City, but, and by then, by October, that's the first frost. So we know after that time, the frost will kill the blossoms in the landscape, right? So we know the bees are done foraging at that point. So we can go out to the apiary and lift up the hive 2 boxes high, we lift it up, and with bees, bottom board, lid, boxes, frames, everything. And if it is 100 pounds, then they probably have enough honey to make it through the winter. If it's lighter than that, then we're gonna feed them until it is 100 pounds.
How do you feed?
We give them, we have feeders and we put sugar syrup or honey. Honey's better. But sugar syrup, well, Stan, he just keeps frames of honey and he puts it back in there. But most people don't have that luxury, so they'll put sugar syrup in there. It's like a 1-to-1-ish ratio of sugar to water. But you make it as thick as you can in the fall because it's hard for them when it's cold to process that water and like evaporate it out.
So you're lifting them just to see how heavy they are. You
Yep.
leave them there though.
Yeah, you just go, whoo, 100 pounds, yes or no, right? Some people use a bathroom scale. They just weigh the hive and they're like, 100 pounds, yes, okay, we're good for winter. Or 120, I maybe can take out a frame of honey and extract it because they don't need all of that. That's surplus, right? Or if it's like 80, you're like, oh, we're gonna buy some sugar, like 10 pounds of sugar and mix it with water and feed it to them, yeah? So there's feeders that are in the hive and feeders on top of the hive. In the fall, we try to always use a feeder that's inside the hive with the bees because if you have an outside feeder, other bee colonies will rob them and steal all their honey. And
You can lift 100 pounds.
I cannot lift 100. My husband does that.
Is that 100
He's the
pounds? Am I
lifter.
right?
I probably could lift 100 pounds actually, but
I can lift, I can't even lift 10, let alone 100.
And with that, is that 2 super boxes,
2 deep boxes.
deep boxes?
Uh-huh. So if it were a different size box, it would have a different weight, like 1 box. You'd still want it to be pretty heavy going into it.
2 deeps is about the same size as 3 mediums.
Yep,
And
exactly.
I based my whole hive off of 3 mediums. I'm not using supers or deeps.
Okay, gotcha. So three, yeah, and like,
2 inches difference, right?
Yeah.
What's a feeder like?
it looks like, I don't know, like a tall, skinny Tupperware. Like that you could pour the syrup into, but it like sits in, you take out one of the frames and you put the feeder in there. Those are for the inside feeders. There are other ones that are outside. Anyway, there's like a ton of different ones, but that's the feeder type that we use.
I did a 1-to-1
Insane.
sugar water mix and made like a candy bar and a cookie sheet.
Okay,
And set that on the top of the hive through the winter and
Okay.
gave myself
like a shim.
a little gap.
Yeah.
Between my lid and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked great. This is
Yeah.
my first year doing
sugar
this,
board.
but
Awesome, and they survived the winter.
it worked great.
We'll give you points for that for sure. Yeah, bees tend to die and it's really hard and sad and we hate that. And Hope that
Don't
they're
they all
longer.
freeze in the winter? I mean, it gets down to 0. How do the bees
they
survive
don't. They
that?
just they form what's called a cluster. And so bees are not. They're cold blooded, right? They're ectothermic, and so they, when it gets cold, they don't die. They just like slow down, right? So, but they form this big ball of or cluster of bees. You know, there's frames in there, but they're like in and among the frames, and they just hang out there, and they take turns rotating from the cold outside to the warm middle and back out again, and they just take turns.
And you leave them outside the
Yep.
hive.
Some people bring them in, but then they consume more honey. They need to be fed more if they're indoors or if they're in a warm place.
Tell them how to cool a hive if it's too hot.
So in the summer, they have to have their brood chamber be a certain temperature, like it's in the mid-90s. So when it's 105 here in Utah, they have to cool it off. So they can either use water and evapotranspiration, right? Like a swamp cooler basically. They'll bring water in and fan their wings and let that evaporation cool the hive. Or if that in the humid areas, they just fan their wings and cool the hive. They don't need to add any more water.
So the whole group will just be fanning their wings?
Yep.
That takes a lot of energy.
It does. So then they eat more honey when they're doing that too. So anyway, in general, bees like hot weather though. They like if it's not in the mid-90s, they have to heat their hive to be the mid-90s. So they like hot weather. Like if you think about the South or something where it's really hot and humid, that's where insects do the best.
So how do they heat their hives?
They heat their hives by they shiver. Actually, they unhinge their wings and they vibrate in their hive. I don't mean to do a little dance up here. That's weird. But, They can unhinge their wings and they shiver, and that warms up. That creates, you know, friction and heat inside the hive. So they do that as a cluster, as a whole group.
Do
Okay.
you ever cover the hives with straw leaves?
That's a really good idea to do that because it keeps them a little bit warmer, and especially if there's like wind coming in through the entrance, that kind of helps. So you can cover the hives, and we've covered hive, we've not covered hive, we've done all the variety of things. We're at the point now where we don't cover the hives, but it's still a good idea to do that. We have some friends that keep bees up in like Evanston area, and they definitely put bales of hay all around their hives to keep them warm. Bees they don't actually freeze to death very often, they starve more, but they, you know, if they're working harder to keep the hive, then it takes more energy and then they run out of food faster. So usually they don't freeze, they starve, but they starve because they were cold and using up a ton of energy. So it's like cold air doesn't make you sick, but really it makes your body stressed out so you get sick. It's kind of like that.
For this time of year, I've got a screen bottom board.
Okay.
Is it too early to pull that screen bottom board out?
Yeah, they need it to be 90 degrees in there. So if you have that screen out, then they're working really hard. And then in the summer, in the evenings, you'll want to watch that temperature too with the screen bottom board. Because, you know, like if it's getting down to 60 at night, they're having to heat that hive with that.
So it's more of a pure summer when it's really warm outside, pull that bottom board out. When it's getting 80 degrees at night kind of thing, 70 degrees.
Yeah, when it's real warm at night, then that's the time to...
Well, what's real warm?
Well, they want it the mid-90s, so anything below that, and they're gonna have to heat up their hive. They can, they're tough, they can do it, but yeah. I leave it in there most of the time, but they're probably when it's the hottest time of year.
July, August, take it out,
then
put it back in the rest of the time.
Yeah, and you can, that's a good option because it does help them.
Helps ventilation.
Yeah. And a screen bottom board works. You can also not use a screen bottom board, just have a solid one, and that works too. Okay. And then by November, by Thanksgiving, so we're using holidays again, but there's freezing weather almost every day, and you need to be done feeding, and the bees are going to be tucked in their beds all winter long, and we're going to leave them alone until the spring. And then usually around Valentine's Day, the following year, we're going to start to see the first pollen come out in the spring. And so on the days where it's warm enough for them to fly, which happens in the mid-40s, then they'll fly out and gather pollen and start bringing those in. And that first pollen is a signal for the queen to start laying more eggs because there's food for the babies. Like pollen is the protein and brood, the baby bees need the protein. So
How long do the bees live?
it depends on the time of year, but generally foraging bees in the summer live about a month.
Oh, really?
Wow.
So not too long, but in the winter, like there's that generation that get fat and they live longer, right? They can live like 6 months. So.
And in February, we get freezing day deal, you know, then they warm that. And
Yeah.
good.
So it's not going to be a fully active hive, but they're on those warm days, they'll go cleanse. They'll, like she read, they'll cleanse outside of the hive, go to the bathroom, and then come back in. They'll go gather pollen and come back in. So that will just happen on only the warm days. The rest of the days they'll stay in their cluster. They'll kind of do their thing in the hive. But if it warms up enough, they'll come out and go. Yeah. So with wrapping hives, you guys, the most popular, like the most honey in the United States is produced in North Dakota and Minnesota, which are much colder than Utah. So they wrap their hives though in the winter because it does not get above 40 degrees in the February. It just stays cold, it stays freezing all the way through until spring. So when you're seeing advice about wrapping hives, often it's coming from those areas which are like there's more bees there, so you're gonna get more bee advice from those areas just naturally, and their climate requires wrapping and insulating and stuff like that. Ours, we want to make sure the bees can get out to cleanse, otherwise they get dysentery in the hive when it's those warm days. Yeah, does that make sense?
When you say wrapping the hive, like they're closing up the entrance, the bees aren't coming out?
Yeah.
What do they wrap it with?
They like insulation. there's a lot of different, there's like as many different ways as there are beekeepers. They say not to just like seal it in black plastic because then it can't breathe so much. So they do try to do like more breathable stuff. I don't know. How are we doing on time?
You're fine.
Do you use an entrance reducer?
If there's robbing, that's the main time we use an entrance reducer, like in the fall. Or sometimes in the early spring there can be robbing too. Robbing happens when there's no nectar for bees to go out and forage. They'd rather get food from flowers than from stilling it and battling with other colonies of bees. But if there's no flowers to gather from, they'll kind of go to war with another colony and try to steal their honey, right? That only happens when there's a dearth, a nectar dearth, though. Like after that first frost when all the blossoms are dead.
In the wintertime, you don't reduce the entrance down?
Not usually,
Okay.
no. And we only do it when we see evidence of robbing, but other people do use entrance reducers more often than
What's
that.
evidence of robbing?
What was that?
What is evidence of robbing?
Oh, okay, so you'd see robbing, mostly you'd see a mess, like robbing bees, they come, they poke a hole in the comb, they suck out the honey and they leave, and they get wax all over their feet, and so you'll see along the entrance of the hive, you'll see like trails of wax and honey, drips of honey, because they're just like hurrying to get in and get out and go. So, and then you'll see like it looks like a lot of activity,
Agitation.
yeah, but they're not like defending their nest, they're just like busy. I don't know. It's hard to explain. We have a video on YouTube. By the way, we have like 200 videos on YouTube if you want to find us. We're at the Honey Company there. So we have a video about what robbing behavior looks like, and if you want to see more about that. It's hard to describe just like without the video.
So is that more common the closer the hives may be? I mean, what's an ideal spacing for colonies?
That's a good question. They've done a lot of research about that, and Stan's read the research and I haven't, and I've heard him say, so this is like I heard it from the grapevine, but they say that in the research that they do, the bees want to be like more than 10 feet apart, but commercial guys, they put 4 on a pallet and then 4 on a
Now,
pallet.
if
Right.
my neighbor has a colony
Mhm.
and I want a colony, should I be a mile from him? Should I be a
No.
half a mile from him, a quarter of a mile?
You can you can get too many bees in an area, but if he has a colony and you have like, even if you have like 10 each, it's not gonna be that big of a deal. It's if you have like a big commercial guy, and then I wouldn't put my bees right next, we wouldn't put our bees right next to a big commercial guy. Just etiquette wise, we don't have, some states have like registered locations, so you can't do it within a mile or whatever of someone else's location. We don't in Utah, we just try to use courtesy, right?
So if a big commercial guy like the competitor of yours has 50 hives
Mm-hmm.
on the neighbor's property, then I'm probably out of luck.
Well, just put out some empty boxes and you might get some swarms.
It's down for him.
You probably, if you have like one or
Try
two,
that.
and
Put the diamond sign out.
I don't know that Stoddards will, because they're really nice, but Jones, he would, okay, I don't mean to gossip. Some beekeepers, so sorry. Some beekeepers get bothered because they're treating heavily for mites, and they get bothered by hobbyist beekeepers that maybe are not treating for mites because they can infect their colonies. So there's some etiquette, and you'd probably want to just have some conversations with the beekeeper and see if
Well,
he's
I've been
okay with
bothered
that.
because they have lots of bees and they come over and I've had them fly in my ears
Yeah.
and so I'm ready to go get the pesticides out to
Oh.
keep my area clear
Mm.
because I can't compete with my
Gotcha.
own bees, so I have to deal with the trouble their bees cause,
Yeah,
if I'll put it that way.
without
And-
getting the honey and.
Yeah, and I get no benefit from it other than a bunch of annoying bees.
Yeah, they go in the bird bath in the pool. We've had to move bees, apiaries more times because of water issues than anything else, right? They go in the neighbor's bird bath or pool or something, and then they get worried about it, and we're like, okay, we don't want to fight, we'll just go somewhere else. There's a lot of places to put bees though. Like, most people want like a backyard hive, but it doesn't have to be your backyard. It could be like we only have one backyard and we have like lots of apiaries, right? So people are happy to have host bees often. So if that's not an option in your backyard, don't like give up. It still can happen, but you might have to drive 10 minutes or something to get to your hive.
You have
but-
to have permission on people's property to put your bees.
Yeah, they'd want to host it, and we when we do, we like pay them like honey. We pay yard rent and honey, unless we're pollinating, and then they pay us. But anyway, just like beekeeping.
What's the
etiquette.
ideal spot in your yard to put it?
Well, you want sun,
Okay.
and you want to be away. Like it depends on where you live. We used to live in Provo, and then we'd always say, put it somewhere where your neighbors can't see, because then they won't get bugged.
Especially
like
Provo.
Well, when they see it, then they're like, oh, there's a bee. They like worry about, and you don't want to make people worry and want.
You mean not getting stung?
Yeah. And anyway, something funny is Stan's grandpa, he used to be, somebody would say, your bees are in my water fountain or whatever, and he'd be like, well, I put little shoes on all of my bees, so do they have little shoes on? Because that's the only way you can tell they're mine. But really, I mean, they were his, but anyway, it's cute.
So if you have animals, do they bother the animals?
That's a good question. They can coexist. Horses are tricky because so livestock could knock the hive over, so that's tricky. Usually people fence livestock out away from bees, like they'll just put a couple panels around the colonies, and then the other livestock can be around. The bees are geo-navigated to their spot, so you can't just be like, like those chicken tractors where you could just scoot it every few days and like have them eat all around your yard. You can't do that with bees. They're just like there. They need to stay in. Anyway, you can move them, but if you want to move them 10 feet, you have to move them 3 miles for 3 days and then back to that spot for 10 feet. So you can't just like move them across the yard very easily. I mean, you can, but you're going to have a bunch of mad bees for a long time. Waiting, they're like, my hive was just here and now it's not. They're smart and they know. Yeah.
There's all kinds of different boxes of hives that people are trying to develop or build. Is it Langstrom, is it found to be just the Langstrom's the only way to go, kind of, or is it because everybody's invested so heavily in the past they don't want to change it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when Reverend Langstreth developed his hive, he patented something called the bee space, which is the space around the comb. And his hive, it was in the early 1800s. I can't remember the year. If Stan were here, he would know. He studies all about hive history. But and there was this huge surge of hive designs then. And then over time, a few hives kind of stood the test of time, and then the rest kind of fizzled out. And then we'll see a surge of all these different designs, and then they'll fizzle out, and then you'll see it again. But the ones that stand the test of time, there's just a few of those that seem to be kind of the tried and true. The Langstreth hive is the easiest one to keep bees in because of how easy it is to add space, room for expansion for the bees.
What's the name of it again?
Langstreth.
Can
It's
you spell it?
Langstreth. Is that right? Anyone? Okay. So the Langstreth hive is named after Reverend Langstreth. The reason is it has removable frames and then it's stackable. But other hives that have lasted kind of the test of time are the top bar hive. The top bar hive is a good hive. It's an intermediate level hive. That's just not just me, like all the researchers say this too. It's a good hive. It's an intermediate level hive because you have to really stay on top of increasing the space, because you use a following board and you just kind of scoot it over as the bees fill up that space. You scoot it over. There's a board that prevents them from going over to the rest of the hive and keeps them in one area. But then when you get to the end of the hive, you have to either extract, you just have to be really on top of it. So if you're a beginning beekeeper, those hives are it's easier to lose hives that way, for bees to die or abscond or swarm. But once you get a few years of experience under your belt, it's super fun to practice and try all the different hive styles. It's just a fun hobby to do. And you can be successful keeping bees in a top bar hive. They're just more labor intensive. And then another one is the Worry hive. That one is really popular too. It stacks vertically, but you manage a whole box at a time. And then other hives are like variations of those. Like there are some that are called the long Langstroth, which is like a top bar hive, but it's long like a top bar hive, but it has frames like a Langstroth. There's like a lot of crossovers that are like hybrids of different hives. Does that make sense? So, yeah, and like the flow hive, it's just a modified Langstroth hive, for example. Like a lot of hives that are becoming popular, just modified ones. I'd probably recommend staying away from like mini hives for honeybee colonies, because honeybees like to grow and they like to have room to expand, and sometimes those miniature hives don't provide that, and that's like a biological necessity for honeybees, so they don't always work that well. Is that okay?
Do you plant certain flowers around your yard for these bees?
Yeah, bees love when we plant lots of flowers. They love they especially love flowers that are like clustered tight together. That's the easiest for them to forage. So clover plants and like sunflower family plants, that where their flowers are, or like onions where there's a lot of places in one spot. Herbs with like mint or oregano where there's just lots of places to forage in one spot. They love all of those. And in our book, I won't go into it, but we have like this huge table of flowering plants that bees love. It's like 4 pages. This is from USU Extension, but so you can look there if you want to. And then and it shows you a lot of different options for that. And then we have a plan. My friend is a landscape, she designs landscape, what's that called? Landscape designer?
Architect, yeah.
Yeah, okay. She made this for us, and it has like some really cool, it's like a plan for a honeybee friendly garden. And it has like a bunch of different textures and varieties and trees and shrubs and flowers, and it's a really pretty plan that she made for us too. So if you want to know more about that, you're welcome to just take a look at that after. But there's a lot of great options for honeybee plants. Anyway, and beekeepers, we look and we watch what bees are on. Do you do that? Like we're like, oh,
We've
look.
got lilacs, and they're in the lilacs like crazy.
Yeah.
They love apricots.
Mm-hmm.
And the
They
apple
love the
trees.
fruit trees, the apple trees, the apricots. And around here, they love the rabbitbrush in the fall and the sunflowers that are along the roadside. And a really popular one is yellow sweet clover, which is a roadside weed that bees love them. And then my favorite is dandelions. I'm like the weird dandelion lady, it turns out.
I have at my house, my gosh, I have 2 acres of dandelions.
I know. We love them. We pick them and make salve and stuff. So.
Do they do anything with the pollen on ryegrass and grapes?
And they have a harder time with grasses. So like you'll see them. I haven't seen them on grass as much, but sometimes corn is like technically a grass, right? You'll sometimes see them on corn, but mostly because they're bored. They don't actually get nutrition off of corn pollen, but they go and buzz around in there too. They don't actually get good things from it though. Like it doesn't, I don't know that it hurts them, but it doesn't give them nutrition. Okay, do you guys, okay, yeah.
Do you find you get stung a lot having bees in your backyard?
That's a good question. Stan gets stung a lot. I try not to. Okay, this is weird. I'm allergic to bees. Like it happens. I know. So I wear like lots of protection if I'm going to be working with bees. Like anyway, I'm pretty careful. And then when he knows when they're getting mad, I like go away and be like, Stan, finish. Good luck, buddy. But like I have an EpiPen, and it's like a full anaphylactic shock for me if I get stung. So it happens to most beekeepers' wives. That is just like I don't know whether we're just really exposed to those venom proteins in our lives, but it happens a lot. I don't know. Do you keep bees too? Okay. If you get
She's
stung,
never been stung.
I got stung once.
I hope that you just never are
I get
allergic.
stung
Yeah.
every time I go to the
But
box.
whatever it's worth, we had a beehive in our yard for a while. Now, we were the beekeepers, so we were just the location.
You're the host. Yeah.
And I discovered that the bees were very friendly. They were very nice. They didn't harass us. We didn't harass them. They were very polite.
Mhm.
The problem was the yellow jackets.
Oh yeah, hornets are way meaner than
Hornets.
bees, but
And
and they can sting more than once in a row.
yes,
Those
but the
stinkers.
bees were great.
So I think that every colony has its own unique temperament. So we personally, like, because of my allergy and because we have kids, we try to breed bees that are nice. But every once in a while there's a colony that's not, and anyway, you learn to recognize that mean behavior and come out of it. Like if they start bumping into your veil, and I'm like, I'm gonna back away now. Okay.
Is it true that you're more, I don't know, angrier bees are more apt to go pollinate and go, not, I don't know if angry was the right word, but
The more aggressive
you're more
bees are-
aggressive, that's the word. Your more aggressive bees or be more willing to go and do versus the calmer.
You know, I heard that I've heard that a lot of times, that aggressive bees make more honey. I haven't read any like research about it, but that's a general trend that people talk about in the industry. If you're in a backyard though, like we're in San Pete, so it's not like, I don't know, we have backyards and we have neighbors, but it's not like, I don't know, Provo where everyone's so close together. But anyway, there you have to be really careful, and you want nice bees for sure. If you have mean bees, then like they have a nuisance clause. If somebody reports you as a nuisance, your bees is a nuisance, then you have to get rid of them, right? But San Pete, I don't think we have that here. I don't know, actually, here I have trouble, but
What are some of the good uses of honey?
some of the good uses of honey.
They're antibiotic, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. So honey, let's see. I'll tell you. Okay, so I'm just gonna look in here.
Good for burns?
Yeah, they're good for burns, and they're good. People use them as like. So I read a study once about cough syrup versus honey, and it turns out that honey is a better cough suppressant than cough syrup is, than the active ingredient in cough syrup. So that was an interesting one. I was like, I'd rather eat honey
My
than
kids
cough
from
syrup.
Ukraine mix the lemon juice with the
With
honey.
honey. Sometimes we do ginger, like we'll just cut up ginger and just pour honey over it and let it sit for a long time. Ginger's my spirit animal. Just kidding. Or it's not an animal, but yeah.
You can simmer 2/3 of a cup of dry elderberries in about a quart of water. So add about a tablespoon of chopped up ginger, about a tablespoon of chopped up cinnamon stick, and about half a teaspoon of cloves, and then simmer it for a while, let it sit, and then when it cools down, strain it and mix it with raw honey.
Oh yeah, to
You
make
know,
the elderberry syrup.
best ways to suppress a cold or flu as it's starting up.
Yeah, it's a really good antiviral
Excellent.
remedy for sure. Yeah.
Also for wound care.
Yeah, honey, they use it in wound care and burns because it's really acidic and has a lot of antimicrobial properties. So, yeah, they use it.
Is it true that it's good for allergies if you get the right kind of pollen in your honey?
Yeah, I don't have allergies myself, but we have a lot of customers that buy honey repeatedly because they say it helps so much with their allergies. So, have you guys found that? Have you anybody taken raw honey for their allergies? Okay.
Is there a way of harvesting the bee pollen?
There is. So there's a thing you could buy called a pollen trap, and you put it between your bottom board and the bottom of the box. So just put it in there, and it basically is, you know how bees, they get pollen everywhere, like covering their whole bodies. They groom themselves. They push all the pollen to what's called their saddlebags, or the pollen sacs in the back of their legs. And then when they're coming in to the hive, if there's a pollen trap in place, it's just basically like kind of like a entrance reducer, but it has a very small hole. They have to crawl through it, and as they crawl through it, the pollen gets knocked off of their legs and falls into like a basket underneath. And so once that's been on for a couple weeks, you can pull out like this drawer, and it will be full of little clumps of pollen in there. So you can harvest it, and we've done that before. We had kind of a negative experience, or Stan had a negative experience at a farmer's market once, where Somebody wanted the pollen for their allergies and they ate some and then they threatened to sue him because they had an intense allergic reaction, which that is
very
if you
much the case.
if you eat pollen, it heightens your allergies for a while, but then they say it makes it better. So it's like this peak, it makes you really symptomatic and then it alleviates it for a long time. Honey is different than that though, because it has like microscopic bits of the pollen in the honey. And so when you eat that honey, you're getting this like low dosage of the thing you're allergic to over time, and it kind of helps make your body not react so much to the thing that it was reacting to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, as you guys was talking salves and things, and pollen, bee pollen is one of the best salves you can have. You mix it up and put it on your wounds and everything else. And
Yep, it's good stuff.
burns and everything.
We've done propolis salves. Propolis is like one of my favorite things to talk about because
And that was part of the question, like the bee
Yeah.
pollen and the propolis and all that, harvesting that out of your box, you just scrape it off and
propolis only dissolves in alcohol. So I don't drink alcohol, and I was afraid of like my bishop would catch me at the alcohol store. So I sent my friend to there. She bought 100 proof vodka, and so we put the propolis in there and dissolve the propolis in there, and you can make a tincture with propolis. Like a salve doesn't work because it doesn't dissolve. Anyway, it doesn't dissolve
that
well.
separates between the alcohol and the propolis?
Well, it just like the alcohol kind of turns like brownish yellow. Propolis is like bee glue, for those who don't know. It's like the stuff bees put everywhere to like stick everything down. And you know, like if you're trying to get your frame out, you can't. You have to use a hive tool to pry it because they put so much of this gluey stuff, which is like a tree resin, and it's really has a lot of health benefits in human medicine too. Anyway, so yeah, you could just scrape it off and put it into the alcohol. It doesn't dissolve really well, like it takes a long time, and it doesn't dissolve all of it, like there's always like chunks in the bottom. But you can use the alcohol that's infused with propolis for different medicinal things. But yeah, it doesn't separate from the alcohol, it stays
a part of it.
Make sure if you smear honey on a wound, you put it 3x3 over it and tape it down.
So you don't get sticky everywhere. Do you know that from experience?
I was a
That
scout
seems like
master,
something I would do.
yeah.
Yeah, that seems like something I would do and then get it everywhere. But okay, let's see.
I was my queen,
Yeah. So how long are we going till 8:30?
probably.
Okay. So the next question of our 4 essential questions is, how is my queen? And so the queen bee is pretty important to the hive. If she's in there, then the bees are calm and happy. She releases pheromones from her head that calm the hive. So when the queen is missing, they notice because they stop receiving those pheromones and they get agitated. And so her job is to calm the hive and to lay eggs, basically. She doesn't make a lot of decisions about things. She just calms the hives and lays eggs.
How long does she live?
She can live a long time. She can live several years if the colony does. And so often, anyway, she can live a long time and keep perpetuating. Sometimes, like lately, that life cycle is getting shorter, I feel like. Because it used to be that she'd live like 5 years, and then it was kind of like 3 years, and now it's just a couple. But because of the bee issues that we're having, but she can live. She has a potential to live a long time. Yeah.
What's causing some of the bee issues?
There's so many factors that, like pesticides and like electromagnetic issues, like 5G kind of stuff, which used to be like just a conspiracy theory, but now they're actually doing scientific research to show that is interfering with the bees' electrical impulses too. And then there's some diseases that affect bees that give them a hard time, and then like especially a pesticide called neonicotinoids, which is they use that to drench apple trees. Often it's like a nicotine substance that kills codling moths in apples. That one's tricky because it kills bees too. And so the problem is that codling moths and honeybees have the same number of days in their life cycle before a new generation emerges. So every time a apply the pesticide and then it knocks the bees out, but then the bees rebuild, and then they apply it again, because that's the time when the coddling moth is coming back again, and then it knocks down the bee population again, etc. It's pretty hard on them. And neonics don't always kill bees, but they make them not feel good, and they make them really disoriented, and sometimes they can't find their way home, and so it's causing some trouble that way. If you want more information about that, Marla Spivak, or about what's causing the bee issues, Marla Spivak from the University of Minnesota, she did a TED Talk probably 10 years ago now. It's really good about honeybees and what's happening with them. I really recommend watching that. It's excellent. She's like my idol, and one time I was at a bee conference and I took my picture with her, and she thought I was an idiot because I asked her to take her picture with me, but I did anyway. Okay. All right. So when we're asking questions about the queen, sometimes she's hard to find in the hive, so we don't always see her because she runs and hides when you open it. She doesn't want to get caught. So if you see her, then you know she's doing well, but there's other things that you can look for in the hive to know if the queen's okay. One is, since she's really producing this calming pheromone, if the hive is calm and organized and active and seems like they're acting like a normal hive, then the queen's probably in there and okay. And you can tell that without ever even opening the hive sometimes. And then over time, you can look and see if the colony's growing over time. That means if there are more bees now than there were before, that means she was laying eggs and growing brood, and they're emerging, and the colony numbers are expanding. And then we're going to look for in the colony, like if you pull out a frame and you look in the hexagon cells where she's laying eggs, do you see brood of all ages? So at first she lays an egg, then it hatches and becomes a larva, then they cover it and make pupa, and then it emerges as an adult. So if you see eggs and you see larvae and you see sealed brood, then you know that the queen is probably in there doing what she's supposed to do. And then, like, what is the brood pattern like? So a healthy queen will lay brood consistently in like almost every cell across a frame. And if it's like a laying worker and not really a queen or something, it's like spotty. It's just like here and there, and you think, if it is the queen, you're like, she's not doing very well. And if it's something else, then it's not the queen either. Then she's having a hard time. Okay.
How often does she lay an egg?
Well, she has the potential to lay, they say, 2,000 eggs a day. So but she doesn't usually do that because she has to have that many cells available for her, and the larva, there has to be enough workforce to support that and enough pollen to feed it. So the workers will slow her down or stop her once they run out of space for that. So it depends. I just need to get a drink of water.
How many cells are on a large deep frame?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good
I
question.
never thought about that, just then.
A lot. I would say hundreds for sure. I don't know.
Well, yeah,
What was your question?
how many cells are there on a deep frame?
I do not know the answer, but we could say, "Hey Siri." Anyone want to do that? Speaking of, okay. If you have more than one colony, a way to tell if your queens are doing okay is like comparing the progress of them. Like if one is like growing and like thriving and the other is like wah wah, then you know that this queen is probably doing better than this one, right? And you can make some management decisions about replacing that queen potentially if you're seeing that they're not doing as well.
How do you replace a queen?
Well, there's lots. It's a pretty long. Okay, so you can buy a queen. You can have the bees raise a queen, and you can buy the queen as a mature queen or as a queen cell, or the bees can raise a queen from any egg, any female egg.
How do you get the bees to do that?
Well, if there is not a queen, then they will it's their impulse to do that. They just have a natural impulse to do that. Yeah.
They feed it special food, don't they, to develop a queen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if there's an egg in there and say there's some kind of an emergency and they need to raise that egg into a queen, but it's just in a worker cell, then what they'll do is they'll remodel that cell and they'll like put a ton of royal jelly in, put that larva out, and then they'll build this queen cup, which they face down. Like most hexagon cells kind of, if you're looking at the frame, they like point straight out at you. But the queen cell kind of looks like a little peanut on the side. I don't know how to describe it. Is that, anyway, I guess I could show you a picture from our book, but it might take
We're
me
all
a
gonna
minute
go
to see
to
it.
Kind of like a white bean,
honeycompany.com and watch the movies.
about a white
videos.
bean size.
Yeah, the site, and then they're like, let's see, I'm not in the right section, but
How much are those books?
oh, they are $35, and this is something that's, okay, so
When the book-
I will pass this around. This is what the cell, a queen cell looks like, right? Okay, this is what we're talking about, emergency queen rearing. Not this little thing that looks like a zit that's about to pop. I don't know what else to say, but this little thing hanging down. Okay, so that's a queen cell. So they'll float the egg out to the edge, and then they'll build a queen cell, and they'll tear out some cells around it. They just remodel the wax to make it, and then they'll feed her a special diet. So all larvae get royal jelly, but the queen gets a lot more, and so that extra nutrition causes her to develop her reproductive system, and so then her like reproductive organs mature, and she's able to mate and lay eggs. So the only difference between the queen and the worker is that she gets that is nutrition. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I was like, weirdly, like I keep thinking about the weird exceptions. Weirdly, like sometimes if there's not a queen, workers can just start laying eggs randomly. And they call them laying workers, but they can't lay fertilized eggs because they don't have the organs to go mate, right? So they just lay unfertilized male eggs only, which, okay, that's, I'm like getting ahead of myself, but of course the DNA, females have DNA from both a male and a female. If it has both DNA sets, then it will be a female, and if it only has the one DNA set, then it will be a male. So males are haploid and females are diploid in honeybees. So that's a weird thing. So the queen bee can lay female eggs because she's mated and she has sperm stored in her body that she can fertilize the eggs with. But laying workers that have never mated can only lay male eggs. Okay, that was a random tangent on laying workers, but we can talk about that one a lot. We don't have to, but maybe not tonight. Okay, so other things you want to look at to tell how your queen is doing is how much honey is there, and then do you see queen cells or like remnants of the queen cells? So like if bees raise a queen, then you would see it, right? It's on the frame. But after that queen emerges, then they're gonna have like the queen cell, they'll start to dismantle it, they'll chew up the wax and use it for other things. And so you might see remnants of a queen cell, so you can learn a little bit about queens for that.
And that would be okay, that's normal.
So another thing that is in our book, I'm just grabbing more copies as I'm like remembering things. Okay, so in this book, this isn't a perfect flow chart, but it kind of gives a good ideas. But when you're having queen trouble, what you could do is you could come to this book and it says, start here. So you start here and you say, I'm having trouble with my queen. What's going on? And you say, do you see eggs? Yes or no? And then it kind of like, it's a flow chart to help diagnose what's going on with your queen. It's not 100% perfect, but it will get answers about your queens most of the time. These are the things that we've experienced with our queens, but there's probably things we haven't seen yet. So maybe not everything's on here, but this is, we have a lot of people call and ask us about their queens, and you're welcome to call us too if you want to. But when they call, we go through like a series of questions to figure out what's happening. And so those are what is in the flowchart, is from hundreds of phone calls, experiences, yes or no, kind of trying to diagnose that. So this is a great resource also. Oh, and then another one that is really cool. I don't know if you want me to talk about my book so much, but we also have this like, let's see. We have a summer inspection checklist kind of thing. Okay, summer hive inspections. So if you're an experienced beekeeper, you probably know all these things and you don't need a checklist. But if it's your first time, this might be helpful to you to like go through and this is what to look for. So my friend Shauna was like, okay, I got my bees and now I have a hive. And she's like, and then I put on my bee suit and I started my smoker and I opened my hive and I was gonna inspect it. And I'm like, now what? You know, like, so I kind of made this chart initially for her and then it kind of became this. But it goes through like specific questions within all of our 4 essential questions for hive inspections. Like it has questions about if there's enough room, if they're healthy, how's the queen, and is there honey? Like it goes through sections about that. The hope is though that you use this a few times and then you're like, oh, I know what to do, and you eventually don't have to use this anymore, right? Eventually you kind of know what to look for. If that makes sense. Okay. That's not gonna stay open. Okay, so the last question we ask is, are my bees healthy? So most of the time, hopefully the answer is yes. And so this goes through, what do healthy adult bees look like? You know, like some of it's obvious, like they have 6 legs, 2 antennae, and eyes and wings. But to be honest, there are diseases that shrivel their wings. So like you know that would be like some kind of weird things happening because if they're just shriveled wings, right? They have 3 hairy body segments. There should be certain proportions of workers, drones, and the queen. Like there's tens of thousands of workers, hundreds of drones. If you start seeing tens of thousands of drones, something's going wrong, right? And you need to diagnose what's happening. If your bees are healthy, you probably won't see varroa mites, which are little maroon dots. They're parasitic, nasty little things that suck the hemolymph off of blood. They're like basically little vampires. They're evil. Just kidding. So you would not see varroa mites, and then it's normal to see some dead bees outside of the colony. Like bees only live 30 days, and if there's 30,000 bees, it's a lot of dead bees, right? That's normal. But if you see like a big pile of dead bees, like it's like an inch thick all over, then you know that something's kind of going wrong. Yeah? Like they might have been exposed to some pesticides or something like that is happening. So if they're healthy, there wouldn't be skunk scratch marks in front of the hive because skunks eat bees, right? And then if the colony is healthy, it looks organized and calm and active, and it's growing over time. Okay, so brood, that's the baby bees, is bright white and it's healthy. It's not gray. It doesn't smell gross. There are bee diseases that make the brood smell really bad, called foul brood. That's a good name, right? Okay, bad disease, good name. But the brood smells foul, so you would expect to have like normal smells. It's white and shiny. You wouldn't see mites on the larva too. And then a tip that they've done a ton of research about, like especially the University of Minnesota, about how much culling or throwing away your old comb helps your bees. Like it almost completely prevents American foul brood to do that. So what that means is about, you know, a couple years into beekeeping, then you're gonna start, you know, looking for the darkest, oldest comb and throwing it away and replacing it with like either a new sheet of foundation, or if you don't use foundation, just like a blank frame for them to rebuild the comb in. So if you do that, it prevents a ton of diseases and issues that you could have later. Like also the comb stores pesticide residue. So if you get that out, then they get a fresh start with clean, throwing away some of the pesticides that can contribute to the bee health issues. Yeah.
Do all the workers produce the wax?
Mostly it's the bees inside of the hive that produce the wax. So do you guys know how they do that? I don't. So bees eat nectar, right? That's their nutrition for themselves as well as for their babies, but they eat the nectar. But what happens is that when they're in wax producing mode, like when that is their turn to do wax, like as they're progressing, one of their jobs might be to make wax. But what happens is that they ingest nectar, and wax is just made out of like complex arrangements of sugars, right? So then they like digest it, and then what happens is that they have their head, their thorax, their abdomen, and their abdomen is made out of little plates. and the wax cells like secrete out between those plates, and it's a liquid when it comes out, but then it quickly solidifies, and then other bees like pick it off. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna have to show you a picture because it's really weird and cool. Let's see. It's before that. It's
So Google says 350 cells, or 3,500 cells per site.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So she could like fill one of those in a day or
Is that
2
one
days,
side or both
pretty
sides?
much.
One side, so 7,000, yeah, so things of 70,000 in a box roughly.
Mhm.
Wow.
Okay.
140,000 2 boxes, wow.
Okay, it's in this section. Things
Is there like
bees-
an index on the back or anything?
Yes, okay. There's things that bees collect and add to the hive. Okay, I know this picture's in there. I might have to look for it in a minute, but the wax sloughs off of their body between their cells of their carapace, of their body, and like just kind of sneaks out between, it's like sweat.
Does it drop down somewhere
Yep, sometimes it drops down, but usually the bees are like with each other, so they're like, oh, wax, and they'll like use their mouth parts and like pick it up off of that and then put it into the comb to build comb. So, okay, somewhere in there, there's a picture of the scales, yeah.
So when you're in your box, how long can you have this box taken apart and put back together? I mean, is it,
So I just didn't hear you. Could you say that again? I'm so
so
sorry.
when newbies get into a box, how long, if you wanna inspect your box and do all this stuff, how long can you have the box all taken apart before it goes back together?
Well,
Can you
I
keep
think
them-
we usually do it pretty quickly unless we're like doing a video or like a class or something.
That's your real experience too.
Yeah, so I'd say like it'd be normal to have it apart for like an hour even, like
Oh, okay.
if we're doing a class.
During the middle of the afternoon warm part of the day kinda, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be like midsummer. And so what we do is we manage whole boxes. So say if it were a 3-story colony, we would smoke it, take off the first box, lay it on its edge, so, and then take
Leave it
off
on
the
its-
second
leave
box,
it on
lay
its
it on
side?
its edge. Yep. So,
Not-
cause if you set it down like this, then all the dirt will stick to the
the
bottom of your
bottom,
frames
right.
and make a mess. So if you
Oh.
go, set it on its side, or put it on a bottom board or something else, but Stan always sets it on its side,
Mhm.
on its end, that's the right word. He corrects me on that. The ends are the small ones, the sides are the long ones,
Well,
apparently.
uh,
So he puts it on the end, like on the skinny end.
So where the handles are, I mean, not handles, but where the bars
Cleats
come
are,
across,
yeah.
that's the ends?
Yep.
Like that.
Yep, and then he'll start in the bottom box, look at there, check some frames, see if the brood is okay. He'll add the next one back on, look at the frames, then add the next one on, look at the frames, maybe take some honey, put the lid on, he's done. So he does it that way. He's done it the other way. He used to do it the other way where he started at the top and works down. And this is preference, like you can do it however you want. It's not, I'm not gonna tell you like the best way, right? But what happens is if you have all 3 boxes there and you start smoking the top hive, then all the bees go down into the next box. So you're like, oh, that's not very many bees, that was easy. Then the next one you're like, oh, that's a lot of bees, and you're like, I can't even see the brood. And then, but you smoke them and then they go down in the bottom one, and by the time you get to the brood chamber, you can't even see them because there's so many bees. So if he does it from the bottom up, then it gives him a chance to,
you mean smoke it from the bottom up?
well, inspect from the bottom up.
Inspect.
So he moves the boxes
I see.
out of the way,
And then he
starts at the
starts, okay.
bottom, and then re-adds it, inspects, re-adds it, inspects. That's just a management preference though, like, you're not doing it wrong if you did it the other way, just can't see as well. Yeah, oh, did you have?
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
It is.
so that's, anyway, that's what he does to make sure that he can, because you want to inspect the brood when you're inspecting, right? You're just doing the 4 questions. Are the bees healthy? Like, is your brood healthy? Is that, how's my queen? Do they have room? Do they have room for expansion, and is there honey? Those are the 4 things that you're looking for every time you get in the hive.
So how often does Stan get into his hives?
About a week, every week or every 10 days. It could be more often than that if he's raising queens. But you want to inspect that often because that's how long bees can go without a queen before they develop laying workers. It's about 10 days. And that is a really hard problem to fix, but if you catch it ahead of that, then you can fix it. You can just get a new queen or provide them some eggs or something like that so they can raise a queen. So that timing every 7 to 10 days is really biology. The bee biology determines that, not us. So we need to get in there. Yeah, laying workers are not that fun to try to fix. They're really difficult to fix.
Is Stan open to having people watching do this? What he does?
Sometimes you'll have to ask him that. You can watch him on YouTube anytime. You'll have to ask him specifically if he's
Go to YouTube.
up for having if he's up for having a hive buddy that day. Just depends on how busy he is. Just yeah, is it time? Okay.
While you're on the topic of going through boxes and stuff real quickly,
Yeah.
can you take frames from the bottom box and move it into a new box?
Yeah.
Like you're starting a new box, a new colony?
Yep.
Split
So
in
like
half?
making a split? Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Can you
So
pull several frames from each box and that's acceptable and replace those and?
yeah, so making splits, we should do a whole class on making splits sometime. And there are some really good methods in our book about that. But like simply a split is when you take one colony and make it into two or more colonies, right? So you know that, but so you can take resources from more than one colony to make a new hive. Yes, they do
Oh, you
that all the
can?
time. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a section in here, it's like how to go from 20 packages to 100 colonies by July or something like that. There's a chart in here. Of course, I'm not gonna be able to find it, and I know we're out of time, so I'm trying to be quick. Okay, so in this one right here, method 2 is you take a frame from each of those different ones and put them together. The only thing is that you wanna make sure that the queen is, like you have to account for the queen. Like she needs to stay in these boxes, because if you're mixing all these bees, like if the queen from this yellow box is in there, then the bees in the blue box will kill her, right? So if you introduce a new queen to those, or let these bees raise a queen, then that's a safe way to do it. But yeah, you can't mix the queens.
But pulling from one box, if you happen to get a queen, I know I've got probably 3 queens. I got a lot of queens in my box. If I know for sure I pulled a queen, that's acceptable. I can put a new queen in the box.
Yep.
And then they don't have to raise one and.
Right, and it's tricky to introduce a queen sometimes, so we have tips for the most successful ways to introduce a new queen in here also, so but there are things you can do to make that more successful. Sometimes if you put like an adult queen in there, then sometimes they'll kill her because she seems foreign. And that's the problem with laying workers, is that they think that the laying worker is a queen. So if you introduce a new one, they'll kill the queen thinking they have one. So you have to let them be queenless for a while so that they're like, oh no, where's our queen? And then if you give them a queen, they're like, okay.
We're good now.
But sometimes it's never 100% sure thing introducing a queen. The only thing is that almost always if you introduce a queen cell, and she emerges in the colony, they almost always accept her that way. But then it takes longer before she's up and running because she has to mate and come back from that flight and do some growing up before she can. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No. The class you have on the internet that you buy, is it the same as the book, or do they correspond together, or?
Yeah, so
that study manual?
Yeah, because you have the online classes
And
for
I've
sure.
had a hard time because
It's long.
you gotta read it, it's not, I couldn't listen to it.
I know. I need to work on that. Maybe I'll just record it and you can listen to my annoying voice. Just kidding. But so the book is divided. Like the first course is my first colony. So these are basically like the printable things from that first course, and then the second course is beginning beekeeping skills. So it's actually, we have those online courses. It's actually split. The book is split up exactly corresponding to the courses.
I have a hard time. I wouldn't make it in school with going by computer. Kids do it.
Yeah, they're a little long.
I'm glad you came up. When did the book come out?
I think it was 2023, but this is the better version. Like the old version was only 50 pages, and this is like 250 pages because I just kept writing and writing and writing. I'm like, I have another idea. I'm gonna put it in the book. So it has all these cool recipes and all the things. Anyway, I'm not trying to be here selling books. This is a bee class, not a book selling class. But thank you so much for coming today and letting me talk to you about bees. Obviously, I could talk about it for like 100 years. So I know that the time is over, so I want to end the class. But if you have any questions and want to talk to me privately after that, I'm happy to answer questions that way too. Thank you.